My coworker called me at midnight, his voice shaking with panic. He said, "Don't go home tonight. Your roommate isn't who she says she is." I asked what he meant. He said, "I just found out she's been using your identity. Check your credit report right now." 10 minutes later, I discovered my entire life had been stolen by the person I trusted most. My name is Jenna Morris. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a marketing manager in Denver. The woman who destroyed my life was my roommate, Becca Shaw, or at least that's what she told me her name was. She was 28, claimed to work in event planning, and we'd been roommates for 8 months. The person who saved me was Owen Hayes, 31, a coworker in my department who noticed something was terribly wrong. My younger sister Riley is 25 and studying cybersecurity in Boston. Detective Lisa Crawford from the Financial Crimes Unit investigated my case. Marcus Chen is a fraud investigator who helped me recover from the worst violation I've ever experienced. If you want to know how I discovered my roommate had been systematically stealing my identity for months and how I fought back, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and hit subscribe, because this story will change how you think about who you trust. 8 months before everything fell apart, I moved to Denver for a promotion. I'd been working at a marketing firm in Ohio for 5 years and finally got the opportunity to manage my own team at our Denver office. It was exciting but also terrifying because I didn't know a single person in Colorado. I had maybe 3 weeks to find an apartment and get settled before starting my new job. I looked at a bunch of places, but everything was either too expensive or in sketchy neighborhoods. Then I found Becca through a roommate matching app. Her profile seemed perfect. She was 28, worked in event planning, didn't smoke, kept regular hours, and had a beautiful 2-bedroom apartment in a great neighborhood that she was willing to share for reasonable rent. We met for coffee and clicked immediately. She was warm, funny, and easy to talk to. By the end of our meeting, I'd agreed to move in the following week. Living with Becca was genuinely great at first. She worked irregular hours because of her event planning job, sometimes gone for entire weekends for weddings or corporate events, so we had plenty of space from each other. But when we were both home, we got along really well. We'd cook dinner together, watch movies, talk about our days. Becca introduced me to some of her friends and helped me feel less alone in a new city. I felt incredibly lucky to have found not just a roommate, but an actual friend. She seemed genuinely interested in my life, asking questions about my family back in Ohio, my new job, my goals for the future. I appreciated having someone to talk to after long work days. When I had a stressful project deadline, Becca even offered to help me organize my paperwork and file away bills so I could focus on work. I thought she was being a thoughtful friend. We celebrated my birthday together in June. Becca threw me a surprise dinner with some of the people I'd met through her, and I felt like I was finally building a life in Denver. Everything seemed completely normal and healthy. Looking back now, I can see all the red flags I missed. There were small things that didn't quite add up, but seemed innocent at the time. A few times I came home to find Becca in my bedroom. She always had a reasonable explanation, like she was looking for a hairdryer or checking if I'd closed the window before a storm. Once I noticed my mail had been opened, and Becca said the mailman must have damaged it during delivery. Another time I couldn't find my social security card after needing it for some job paperwork. Becca helped me search everywhere and suggested it might have accidentally gotten thrown away. I ordered a replacement and didn't think about it again. Becca would sometimes ask specific questions about my finances that seemed a little nosy, like how much I was making at my new job or which bank I used. But I figured that was just normal roommate talk about splitting expenses and making sure we could both afford rent. She asked about my student loans once, and I told her I'd finally paid them off last year. She asked about my credit score when we were talking about her wanting to buy a car eventually. Nothing seemed suspicious in the moment. She was my friend and roommate. Why would I question her interest in my life? The night that everything changed started completely normally. It was a Thursday in November, and I was working late at the office finishing a presentation for a client meeting the next morning. I'd texted Becca that I'd be home late, and she'd responded with a thumbs up emoji. Around 11:30, I was still at my desk when Owen from my department knocked on my door. Owen and I had become work friends over the past few months. He was quiet and thoughtful, and we'd grab lunch together sometimes. But that night, he looked pale and serious in a way I'd never seen before. He asked if we could talk privately. I said sure, and he closed my office door behind him. He pulled out his phone and showed me something that confused me at first. It was a profile on a dating app. The profile had my photos, pictures I recognized from my Instagram and Facebook, but the name on the profile wasn't mine. The bio contained accurate details about my job, my interests, even mentioned that I'd recently moved to Denver, but I had never created an account on that app. I'd never even heard of it. Owen explained that his cousin lived in Denver and had matched with this profile on the dating app. His cousin thought the woman looked familiar and sent Owen a screenshot asking if he knew her from work, since the bio mentioned our company by name. Owen had immediately recognized my photos and knew something was wrong, because he'd heard me say multiple times that I wasn't dating anyone and wasn't on any apps. Owen said he'd tried to contact the profile through the app's messaging system, asking direct questions about where they really worked and how they got those photos. Whoever was running the account had blocked him immediately. That made Owen suspicious enough to do some digging. He'd used reverse image search on my photos and found them posted on multiple other platforms across the internet. There were profiles on different dating sites, a rental application website, even a forum for people applying for personal loans. Someone was using my face, my photos, and details about my life all over the internet. Owen said he'd tried calling me earlier, but I hadn't picked up because I was in a meeting, so he'd waited at the office to tell me in person. I felt physically sick looking at his phone screen. I asked who would do something like this. Owen looked uncomfortable and asked carefully if anyone had access to my personal documents, my laptop, or my phone. The answer hit me like a punch to the stomach. Becca. She had access to everything. We lived together. She'd been in my room multiple times. She'd helped me organize my paperwork. She'd been there when I left my laptop open on the kitchen table. She asked questions about every aspect of my life, and I'd answered because I thought we were friends. Owen suggested I check my credit report immediately, right now, before doing anything else. I opened a free credit monitoring website on my computer and logged in using my basic information. What loaded on the screen made the room start spinning. There were 4 credit cards listed under my name that I had never opened. A personal loan for $15,000 that I'd never applied for. A car loan for $28,000. Multiple hard inquiries on my credit from the past 6 months, from companies I'd never contacted. My credit score had dropped from 760 to 550. I couldn't breathe properly. Owen looked at the screen and immediately said I needed to call the police right now. My hands were shaking so badly I couldn't dial my phone. Owen took it from me and called 911 himself. He explained calmly to the dispatcher that we had a victim of identity theft who'd just discovered extensive fraud and needed officers to respond. While we waited, I started frantically checking other accounts. I looked at my email login history and saw access from devices and locations I didn't recognize. Someone had been reading my emails for months. I checked my cloud photo storage and the activity log showed recent access from an unknown device. Someone had gone through all my personal photos. I called my bank's fraud hotline with shaking hands and told them I needed to freeze my accounts immediately because someone had stolen my identity. The representative put a hold on everything while I verified my information. Then I called Riley, even though it was after midnight in Boston. She answered groggily, asking what was wrong. I tried to explain, but my voice kept breaking. Riley woke up fast and told me to change every password I had right now and enable 2-factor authentication on everything. She asked who had physical access to my documents and devices. I said only Becca. Riley went quiet for a second and then said we needed to assume Becca had copies of everything. 2 police officers arrived at my office building around 12:30 in the morning. I walked them through everything I'd discovered in the past hour. The fake dating profiles Owen found, the fraudulent credit cards and loans on my credit report, the unauthorized access to my email and cloud storage. I told them about Becca, how we'd been roommates for 8 months, how she'd had access to my personal space and documents, how she'd even helped me file paperwork. The officers took detailed notes and said they needed to speak with Becca as soon as possible. They asked if I wanted to go home or if I had somewhere else to stay tonight. I said there was no way I could go home and face Becca alone, not knowing what she'd done. Owen immediately offered to drive me to a hotel and said he'd wait with me until I was checked in safely. The officers said they would go to my apartment to make contact with Becca and that I should stay away until they'd completed their initial investigation. At the hotel, I couldn't even think about sleeping. I sat on the bed with my laptop and kept searching my name online, finding more and more evidence of my stolen identity. There were reviews posted under my name on websites I'd never visited, a resume on a job search site with my real education history, but fake work experience. Every discovery made me feel more violated and angry. Around 2 a.m, I got a call from Detective Lisa Crawford from the Financial Crimes Unit. She'd been assigned to my case and wanted me to come to the police station first thing in the morning to file a comprehensive report with all the documentation I could gather. Then she told me something that made my stomach drop even further. Officers had gone to my apartment, but Becca wasn't there. When they looked around with the landlord's permission, they noticed that Becca's bedroom looked partially cleared out. Her closet had empty hangers, drawers were half empty, and personal items seemed to be missing. She'd started packing and leaving before I even discovered what she'd done. Detective Crawford said something else that made everything even worse. In the basement storage area assigned to our unit, officers found a locked filing cabinet that neither the landlord nor I had known was there. When they opened it, they found documents that didn't belong to me. There were multiple fake driver's licenses with my photos, but different names on them, blank checks printed with my bank account information, photocopies of my social security card, birth certificate, and passport. But there were also documents for 3 other women I'd never heard of. Becca had been running an organized identity theft operation, and I was just her most recent target. Over the next few days, the full picture emerged, and it was so much worse than I'd imagined. Detective Crawford explained that the woman I knew as Becca Shaw wasn't who she claimed to be. The real Becca Shaw was a woman living in Florida who'd had her own identity stolen 2 years ago and still hadn't fully recovered. The person living in my apartment had stolen that woman's identity and used it to build a fake life in Denver. She deliberately targeted me through the roommate app because I just moved to the city, had no local connections who knew me well, and according to my profile, I had a stable job which suggested good credit. Every single thing about our friendship had been calculated and fake. The personal questions she asked weren't friendly interest. They were intelligence gathering. When she helped me organize paperwork, she was photographing my documents. The times I found her in my bedroom, she was likely installing spyware on my laptop or searching for additional documents. Our entire 8-month friendship had been an elaborate con designed to steal everything about my identity. Detective Crawford gave me a full breakdown of the damage, and the numbers were staggering. Becca had opened 7 credit cards in my name with a combined balance of over $45,000. She'd taken out a $15,000 personal loan and a $28,000 car loan. She'd filed a fraudulent tax return using my information and collected the refund. She'd used my identity to rent a different apartment across town, trashed it, and abandoned it, leaving me legally responsible for thousands in damages. She'd opened utility accounts in multiple locations that went unpaid and ended up in collections under my name. The total estimated damage was over $100,000. Even worse, because Becca had so much real information about me and had done everything so carefully with legitimate-looking paperwork, proving that I wasn't responsible would take months or possibly years. My credit was completely destroyed. My financial life was in absolute ruins. I refused to just accept this and let it destroy me. With Detective Crawford guiding me through the process, I filed formal police reports, submitted fraud affidavits to all 3 major credit bureaus, and started disputing every single fraudulent account. I hired Marcus Chen, a fraud investigator who specialized in helping identity theft victims recover. Marcus was honest with me that the process would be long, expensive, and frustrating, but he'd seen people recover from situations just as bad as mine. We'd need to document absolutely everything: contact every financial institution involved and build an airtight case proving I was a victim and not a willing participant. Riley flew out from Boston to help me. She used her tech knowledge to track down every single place online where my identity had been used. We spent entire weekends going through documents, making spreadsheets, filing disputes, and making phone calls. My mom, Susan, sent me money to help cover the legal fees and living expenses since my bank accounts were frozen during the investigation. Detective Crawford's team was working to find Becca, or whoever she really was. They discovered she'd used the same pattern in 3 other cities before Denver. She'd find young professional women who were new to an area, become their roommate, gain their trust, steal their identities, and disappear before getting caught. Her real name was Melissa Vance, and she had active warrants in multiple states. Investigators tracked her through the car she'd purchased using my fraudulent loan. She'd sold it to a dealership in Las Vegas. They got security footage from the dealership showing her and traced her to Henderson, Nevada, where she was finally arrested 3 weeks after disappearing from Denver. While Melissa sat in jail waiting for trial, I faced my own battle that felt just as overwhelming. I had to fight with every bank, credit card company, and loan institution to convince them I was a victim and not responsible for the debt. Despite having police reports and official fraud affidavits, the companies were incredibly slow to act. Some representatives actually suggested I must have been careless with my personal information or that I'd given Melissa permission to use my accounts. Others said I needed to prove the signatures on applications weren't mine, which meant hiring a handwriting expert I couldn't afford. One credit card company insisted I still owed them $4,300, even after I sent them copies of the police report 5 times. I hired a lawyer who specialized in identity theft cases because I was getting nowhere on my own. The legal fees kept piling up, but my mom took out a small loan to help me fight this. Owen organized a fundraiser at work, and my coworkers donated over $8,000 to help with my legal costs. Knowing people believed me and supported me gave me the strength to keep going when I wanted to give up. I became an expert on identity theft laws and victims' rights out of necessity. I learned about the Fair Credit Reporting Act and the Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act. I learned which federal agencies to contact and how to escalate complaints when companies refuse to cooperate. Marcus taught me how to write effective dispute letters that cited specific laws and regulations. Riley helped me lock down all my digital accounts and taught me about security measures I'd never even considered before. Slowly, painfully, I started making progress. One credit card company finally agreed to discharge the fraudulent debt. Then another one followed. The personal loan was forgiven after 3 months of fighting. The car loan took 6 months, but was eventually resolved. Each small victory felt enormous after so much frustration. Detective Crawford kept me updated on the investigation into Melissa. She explained that Melissa was a skilled social engineer who'd studied psychology and manipulation tactics. Everything she did was calculated. She'd built trust quickly by sharing fake vulnerabilities and creating a sense of friendship. She'd asked seemingly innocent questions that gathered crucial data. She'd timed her thefts carefully when I was distracted with work. She'd spread the fraudulent activity over months, so nothing would trigger immediate red flags. Understanding that this was professional-level manipulation helped me stop blaming myself for being stupid or careless. Melissa's trial was scheduled for 8 months after her arrest. I would have to testify and face the woman who'd pretended to be my friend while destroying my life. I worked with a victim's advocate to prepare my testimony, practicing how to stay calm and stick to facts. I wrote a victim impact statement describing how the identity theft had affected everything: my credit score, my ability to rent apartments, my mental health, my ability to trust anyone. The prosecutor told me my case was strong and that with the evidence from multiple victims across different states, Melissa would likely face serious prison time. When the trial finally began, I sat in the courtroom watching Melissa being led in wearing orange jail clothes. She looked so different from the warm, friendly Becca I remembered. Her hair was darker. Her expression was cold and blank. The prosecution presented mountains of evidence: the fake IDs and documents from my apartment's basement storage, digital forensics showing Melissa accessing my accounts from her devices, testimony from 3 other women in different states who'd been victimized the same way, financial records tracing the stolen money through various accounts. When I took the witness stand, I kept my voice steady and told my story clearly. I described how we met, how Melissa had gained my trust over months, the specific ways she'd accessed my personal information. I explained the financial damage and the year of work it took to start recovering. Melissa's defense attorney tried to suggest I'd been careless, but I calmly explained that I'd taken normal precautions and that Melissa had deliberately exploited our living situation to commit crimes. When the attorney asked how this affected me, my composure finally cracked. I said I no longer trusted people easily, that I'd spent thousands of dollars I didn't have fixing problems I didn't create, and that I'd lost countless hours of my life proving my own identity belonged to me. The other 3 victims gave similar testimony. One woman had been arrested for crimes Melissa committed using her identity. Another had been denied her dream job because of the destroyed credit. The pattern was undeniable and devastating. The jury took less than 4 hours to find Melissa Vance guilty on all charges. At sentencing, the judge called her crimes calculated and cruel. Melissa was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. When the sentence was read, I felt relief wash over me. Justice had been served, even though 12 years couldn't undo the damage. By the time of Melissa's trial, I'd already made significant progress recovering my identity and my life. 8 of the 10 fraudulent accounts had been resolved and removed from my credit report. My credit score had climbed back up by over 150 points, though it still wasn't where it had been before. The apartment damages had been forgiven after the landlord accepted the police report as proof I wasn't responsible. My tax issues with the IRS had been sorted out. I still had 2 accounts in dispute that were taking longer, but Marcus assured me they'd eventually be resolved. The total recovery process had taken over a year of constant fighting, phone calls, paperwork, and frustration, but I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. I'd learned more about credit systems, fraud law, and financial institutions than I ever wanted to know, but that knowledge made me feel powerful instead of helpless. After the trial ended, I made the decision to stay in Denver instead of running away from the city where everything had happened. I'd built real friendships here, especially with Owen, who'd literally saved me by paying attention and speaking up when something seemed wrong. I'd found a therapist who specialized in trauma from financial abuse and betrayal, and our sessions helped me process the complicated emotions that came with being deceived so completely by someone I'd trusted. I moved into a small studio apartment where I lived alone. I preferred that to the risk of another roommate situation, at least for now. I adopted a dog from a rescue shelter, a sweet mutt named Charlie, who was loyal and honest in ways that felt safe. Riley visited from Boston several times, and my mom came to stay for an entire month to help me settle into my new place and just be there for support. About 6 months after the trial, I was contacted by a victims advocacy organization that worked specifically with identity theft survivors. They asked if I'd be willing to talk with other victims who were just starting their recovery journeys. I agreed, thinking it might help me process my own experience, and I found it incredibly healing to guide others through the same system I'd fought so hard to navigate. I started volunteering regularly, offering practical advice about dealing with creditors, writing effective dispute letters, and maintaining hope during the long recovery process. I also began speaking at community centers and local colleges about identity theft prevention. I shared my story to help people understand how it really happens, that victims aren't stupid or careless, and that con artists like Melissa are skilled, professionals who exploit normal human trust. Through this advocacy work, I found real purpose in what had been the worst experience of my life. I learned to balance healthy caution with the ability to still connect with people. My therapist helped me understand that what Melissa did wasn't my fault, and that being open to friendship wasn't a weakness or a mistake. But I did change how I protected myself. I froze my credit so no one could open accounts in my name without me unfreezing it first. I started using completely unique passwords for every single account, and a password manager to keep track of them. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything. I checked my credit report every month instead of once a year. I was more thoughtful about what personal information I shared and who I shared it with. But I also reminded myself that protecting yourself doesn't mean distrusting everyone. It just means being informed and taking reasonable precautions that everyone should take. Despite all the trauma, some genuinely positive things came from the experience. I developed a much closer relationship with Riley through everything we went through together. I discovered I was far stronger and more resilient than I'd ever known. I became an advocate who's helped dozens of people recover from similar situations. Owen introduced me to one of his friends, a teacher named Alex, and we started dating slowly and carefully. I was honest with Alex from the beginning about what I'd been through and why I needed clear boundaries and open communication. He was patient and understanding, and we built something healthy and real. I even got promoted at work partly because my boss said she was impressed by how I'd handled such a difficult situation with determination and professionalism. 2 years after Owen knocked on my office door that night, my credit has completely recovered. Every fraudulent account is resolved. I've saved up an emergency fund again. I bought a car with my own legitimate auto loan. I still have moments of anxiety when I need to share personal information or when someone wants to get close quickly. But I have tools to manage those feelings and people I can talk to about them. Melissa Vance is 4 years into her 12-year sentence. And honestly, I rarely think about her anymore. What she did became a chapter in my life, not the whole story. I'm 31 now, and I've rebuilt everything she tried to destroy. What I learned is that identity theft isn't just a financial crime where someone steals your credit card number. It's a profound violation that affects how you see yourself, how you trust others, and how you move through the world. But recovery is absolutely possible with persistence, support, and knowledge. If you're watching this and you've been through something similar, please know you're not alone, and it wasn't your fault. Con artists like Melissa are professionals who target normal, trusting people. The shame belongs entirely to them, not to you. If you haven't experienced this, protect yourself now by monitoring your credit regularly, using strong, unique passwords, enabling two-factor authentication, and being thoughtful about who has access to your personal documents and information. And if someone ever warns you about something suspicious like Owen did for me, take it seriously immediately. That one conversation saved me from even worse damage than I suffered. Hit that subscribe button and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from and whether this story changed how you think about protecting your identity. If sharing my worst experience helps even one person avoid this nightmare, or helps one victim feel less alone in their recovery, then it was absolutely worth reliving it. Trust people, but verify what you can. Protect yourself actively, not fearfully. And remember that even when someone destroys what you've built, you have the strength inside you to rebuild it even stronger than before.